Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever felt like no matter how much love you give, it's never truly received, like your words fall flat, your efforts go unnoticed, and you're stuck wondering, what am I doing wrong? Today, let's dive into the topic that silently destroys emotional connection in relationships, and most people don't even realize they're doing it. By the end of this video, you'll have the tools to stop pushing love away and start creating real, lasting intimacy. If you're ready to change the way you show up in love, make sure you hit that subscribe button. This is just the beginning. When someone finally gathers the courage to express how they feel, it's not a moment for correction, it's a moment for connection. Yet so often, we respond with a phrase that feels small but does lasting damage. You shouldn't feel that way. Those 5 words can build an instant wall between two people. They may be said with good intentions, a desire to make the other person feel better or to fix the situation, but the impact is anything but healing. What it really communicates is, your feelings make me uncomfortable, so I need you to change them. That phrase can invalidate years of trust in just seconds. People open up when they feel safe, not when they feel judged, and when they're met with dismissal, they retreat. Not only from the conversation, but often from the relationship itself. Emotional safety isn't built by saying the right thing, it's built by making space for the real thing. When a partner, friend, or loved one shares a feeling, no matter how irrational or raw it may seem, they're not asking for a verdict, they're asking for presence. Saying, "You shouldn't feel that way," is like turning off the light right when someone was starting to see what was going on inside them. Feelings are not always logical, but they are always real. We don't have to agree with someone's emotions to honor them. We just have to accept that their experience is valid to them, even if it doesn't make sense to us. That's the foundation of empathy. And empathy is the lifeblood of vulnerability. Without it, the relationship turns cold. Think about the courage it takes to admit you're hurt, scared, or insecure. These are not easy admissions. They come with trembling hands and guarded hearts. So when someone finally lowers their emotional walls and you respond by saying they shouldn't feel that way, it sends a loud message. Put the walls back up. And most people do. They remember how it felt to be emotionally rejected, and they decide that silence is safer next time. Slowly but surely, emotional distance sets in. Conversations become surface level. Conflict gets buried. Resentment grows quietly, fed by the belief that vulnerability is punished, not protected. That one phrase said in passing becomes the reason someone stops sharing what really matters. There's a hidden arrogance in trying to tell someone how they should feel. It assumes that our perspective is the standard and theirs is flawed. But emotions don't work like math problems. They don't need solving, they need seeing. When we skip over someone's pain and rush to logic, we miss the moment. We miss the opportunity to stand in their shoes, even briefly, and say, "I hear you, that sounds hard." That single moment of acknowledgement can do more for a relationship than 100 solutions. People don't need perfection, they need presence. And presence requires us to resist the urge to correct and simply be there. We've all been on the receiving end of emotional invalidation. Think back to a time you were upset and someone told you to calm down or that you were overreacting. Did that help, or did it make you feel more alone in your experience? Most of the time, it's the latter, and that's because being told not to feel what you're already feeling doesn't stop the emotion, it adds shame to it. Now, you're not just sad, you feel wrong for being sad. You're not just angry, you feel guilty for being angry. This emotional layering creates confusion and isolation. It teaches people to suppress instead of express. And suppression is a breeding ground for emotional disconnection. Relationships thrive on truth, not perfect communication, but honest emotion. And honesty is messy, it's vulnerable. It doesn't always sound polite or polished, but when someone brings you that raw truth, what they're really asking is, can you still love me like this? That's not the time to critique their tone or question their feelings. It's the time to listen with your whole presence. To say, I'm here, keep going. Because when you make space for someone's emotional reality, you show them they don't have to hide. And people don't grow closer through silence, they grow closer through safe expression. If your goal is connection, not control, you'll learn to pause before correcting. You'll recognize that just because you wouldn't feel a certain way doesn't mean someone else is wrong for feeling it. Emotional maturity means we don't always have to understand to empathize. Sometimes we simply say, that makes sense given what you've been through, or thank you for telling me. It's not weakness to validate, it's strength. It takes strength to hold space for emotions that are different from your own. And it takes wisdom to know that emotional safety is more powerful than emotional analysis. We often underestimate the damage done by small phrases. We think the big fights are what destroy connection, but more often it's the tiny cuts of daily dismissal. A repeated "you're too sensitive," or "that's not a big deal," or "you always take things the wrong way." Over time, those phrases become the soundtrack of a relationship that feels unsafe, and eventually people stop playing the music altogether. They stop talking, stop trusting, stop trying, all because they were told over and over again that their emotions didn't matter. But here's the truth: every feeling has a reason. And if you care about someone, you care about the reason too. It's never too late to create a safer emotional environment. It starts with replacing that dismissive phrase with something more open. Instead of saying, "You shouldn't feel that way," try, "Tell me more about what you're feeling," or "Help me understand why that hit you so hard." These questions don't require agreement, they simply offer connection, and that connection is what keeps the emotional bridge strong. Relationships aren't built in moments of agreement, they're built in moments of acceptance. So next time someone trusts you with their heart, don't shut the door, sit with them, listen, and remind them that their feelings, however messy, have a place with you. Validation is often misunderstood. People assume that if they validate someone's feelings, it means they agree with everything that person is saying or feeling, but that's not what validation is about. Validation is about acknowledgement. It's about letting someone know that what they feel is real, that their emotional experience matters. You're not endorsing the behavior or admitting fault, or even saying that their feelings are justified in a logical sense. You're simply saying, "I see that this is your reality right now." That alone is powerful. It tells the other person that their voice has weight, that their inner world isn't invisible. And in a world where most people feel unseen, validation is a form of love. When someone shares how they feel, what they're truly looking for isn't a solution. They're looking for resonance. They want to feel that they're not alone in what they're experiencing. And that connection begins the moment we stop trying to argue with their emotions and start accepting that emotions by nature are not negotiable. You can't logic someone out of a feeling they didn't logic themselves into. They didn't decide to feel hurt or anxious or angry. It just happened. So when you respond with empathy instead of resistance, you become the safe space they've been searching for. That is where trust lives. That is where relationships thrive, not in agreement, but in understanding. Often people rush to fix what isn't theirs to fix. Someone says, "I feel anxious," and the other replies, "You don't need to worry." Someone says, "I feel hurt by what you said," and they respond, "That wasn't my intention." These responses come from defensiveness or discomfort, not cruelty, but the result is still invalidation. Instead of making the person feel heard, it makes them feel dismissed. What would happen if we just paused and said, "I hear you, that must be hard"? No explanations, no corrections, just presence. That's where emotional safety begins. That's where people start to open up instead of shutting down. It takes emotional strength to validate someone when you don't fully understand what they're feeling. It's easy to support someone when their emotions make sense to you, but when they're upset about something you don't get or reacting in a way you wouldn't, it becomes tempting to rationalize their feelings away. That's the real test of connection. Can you stay present even when it doesn't make sense? Can you accept that what makes little sense to you may be very real to them? That's not about logic, it's about compassion. And compassion means allowing someone else's truth to exist without needing to shrink it to fit your own. Validation doesn't mean agreement. You can disagree with someone's perspective and still make space for their feelings. It's entirely possible to say, "I wouldn't have seen it that way, but I understand why you did," or "That wasn't my intent, but I can see how it impacted you." Those words can heal more than any apology spoken in a rush, because people aren't always looking for someone to take sides. They're looking for someone to stand beside them, not to justify their pain, but to sit in it with them, to say, "I'm not going anywhere, even if we're not on the same page." That's the kind of connection that creates emotional intimacy. The problem with always trying to explain or defend is that it turns emotional expression into a debate. When someone is vulnerable enough to express hurt, confusion, or insecurity, and we immediately counter with our own point of view, we send a clear message: your emotions are up for argument. That causes people to shrink, to question themselves, to believe their feelings are irrational or exaggerated. And when that happens often enough, they stop expressing altogether. Validation is the antidote to that cycle. It says, "You don't have to fight to be understood here. I'm already listening." That one shift in approach can repair what endless conversations failed to. There's something deeply human about being seen, not just looked at, but truly seen. When someone validates your emotions, they're not just acknowledging your words, they're recognizing your experience. And that kind of recognition can calm the most anxious heart. It can soften walls that have been up for years. It can restore faith in people who've been hurt too many times. Because when someone says what you're feeling matters, what they're really saying is you matter. And most people don't need fixing. They just need that reminder that they're worth being heard, worth being felt with, worth being understood. A lot of us grew up not knowing how to validate because we weren't validated ourselves. We were told to toughen up, to stop crying, to move on. So now, as adults, we struggle to hold space for feelings, ours and others. But growth means breaking that pattern. It means learning to respond differently. It means telling your partner, your friend, or your child, I may not get all of what you're going through, but I want to. That alone can be revolutionary. You don't need the perfect words. You just need to care enough to try, because even imperfect validation is better than polished indifference. It's not just about the words you say, it's the energy behind them. Validation can be as simple as a nod, a gentle tone, a look that says, I'm here. Sometimes silence can validate too if it comes with presence. You don't always have to know what to say. In fact, trying to say the right thing can sometimes block the most real connection. What matters is intention. When people feel that your heart is open to their pain, they'll open theirs too. That's how you build emotional bridges, not by always agreeing, but by always caring. Caring enough to hold space for feelings that are not your own. If there's one thing that holds relationships together, it's the ability to validate even when it's hard. When tensions rise, when misunderstandings happen, when emotions run high, it's validation that brings people back to center. It's what cools conflict, restores trust, and builds respect. So the next time someone shares how they feel, resist the urge to correct or convince. Just be there, be open, be kind, because at the end of the day, no one remembers the perfect response, but they always remember how safe they felt with you. And safety is what keeps love alive. Every emotion that someone expresses has a root. It may not be visible at first glance, and it may not always seem logical, but it's there. Feelings don't just appear out of thin air, they grow from something. A past experience, a childhood wound, a fear, a disappointment, or even an unmet need. When we dismiss someone's emotion without taking the time to understand its source, we're not just ignoring the feeling, we're cutting off the conversation before the truth has a chance to emerge. It's like trimming the leaves of a plant while leaving the roots untouched. The issue will grow back again and again. People don't want to be right, they want to be understood. And if you want to truly understand someone, you have to stop brushing past their feelings. You have to sit with them long enough to see what lies beneath the surface. The reason so many people feel disconnected in relationships is because their emotional experiences are often treated like problems to solve instead of stories to explore. When someone says they're upset and the immediate response is you're overreacting or just calm down, it shuts the door on the deeper truth that's trying to come out. Maybe that anger comes from years of being unheard. Maybe that sadness comes from a fear of being abandoned. Maybe that anxiety is rooted in past betrayal. But we never find that out if we shut it down too quickly. People need space to unpack their emotions. Not solutions, not advice, just space. And when we give them that, we become someone they feel safe opening up to, not just in the easy moments, but in the hard ones. It's tempting to only respond to what's on the surface. Someone raises their voice and we react to the volume, not the pain underneath. Someone gets quiet and we assume they're fine, rather than asking what they're afraid to say. But behind every emotional reaction is a message. It may not be spoken clearly, but it's there, waiting to be heard. If you listen with judgment, you'll miss it. If you listen with curiosity, you'll uncover it. That's why it's so important to lead with compassion instead of correction. Ask questions that open the door, not statements that close it. Say things like, what do you think is really bothering you? Or where do you feel this coming from? Those kinds of questions don't just help the other person, they build deeper connection between you. There is no such thing as an overreaction. There are only reactions that are misunderstood. What looks like a small thing to you may represent something huge to someone else. A forgotten text might feel like rejection to someone who's experienced neglect. A sarcastic joke might sting deeply to someone who grew up around constant criticism. We don't all carry the same emotional history, so we can't expect feelings to make sense in the same way to everyone. That's why empathy matters so much. It allows us to consider that what we see isn't always the full picture. It helps us pause instead of dismiss, and in that pause we make space for healing. When someone opens up emotionally, they're giving you access to the roots of their pain. That's a sacred invitation. It shouldn't be met with interruption, correction, or defensiveness. It should be met with patience, because getting to the root takes time. Most people don't even fully understand why they feel the way they do until they talk it out. That's why being a good listener is so important. Not a listener who waits to respond, but one who listens to understand. That kind of presence gives people the courage to go deeper. And the deeper they go, the more they can begin to process, heal, and let go of what's been holding them down. Avoiding the root of an emotion never makes it go away. It just buries it. And buried emotions don't die. They fester. They show up later as resentment, withdrawal, defensiveness, or even bitterness. And by the time it surfaces again, it's stronger and more complicated. That's why emotional avoidance is so dangerous in relationships. It tricks us into thinking everything is fine when really there's a storm brewing under the surface. But when we create space for those buried emotions to come out, when we invite the other person to speak freely without judgment, we interrupt that pattern. We give emotions the chance to be expressed in their original vulnerable form instead of their later hardened version. Being willing to explore the root of someone's emotion doesn't require a psychology degree. It just requires presence, patience, and care. You don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to fix their pain. You just need to be the kind of person who's not afraid to sit in it with them, to say, let's figure out what's really going on here together. That simple offer can bring more healing than a dozen self-help books. Because in that moment, you're not just solving a problem, you're honoring a person. You're showing them that their pain matters and that they're not alone in carrying it anymore. Some people have spent their whole lives being told that their feelings are too much, too dramatic, or too sensitive. So they've learned to stay quiet, to shut down, to bottle things up until they explode. When they do open up, they often expect to be dismissed again. That's why your response is so important. If you can meet that moment with gentleness, you can begin to rewrite the emotional script they've been given. You can show them that they're not too much, they're just human, that their feelings aren't a burden, they're a doorway to deeper connection, and that someone finally sees past the surface and into the soul of what they're really feeling. The most powerful thing you can say to someone who's emotionally overwhelmed is, it's okay to feel this. Not calm down, not you're being too emotional, just it's okay. That phrase opens the door to understanding. It removes the shame from feeling. It gives someone the permission to keep exploring instead of shutting down. And once they feel safe enough to keep digging, that's when the root starts to show. That's when old wounds surface. That's when the deeper story behind the emotion finally comes to light. And when that happens, you're not just having a conversation, you're helping someone heal. Every emotional moment is an opportunity. You can choose to silence it or to see it. You can choose to dismiss or to dig deeper. And the choice you make determines whether the relationship grows or deteriorates. When you take the time to understand the root of what someone is feeling, you're building something lasting. You're saying, I want to know the real you, not just the version you show the world. That level of care creates trust. And trust creates the kind of love that isn't shaken by surface-level misunderstandings. It's a love that's anchored at the root. In relationships, the desire to control often shows up disguised as care. It sounds like, let me fix it, or you should do it this way, or here's what you need to understand. On the surface, it can seem helpful, like offering advice or giving direction. But underneath, control is usually rooted in our discomfort with emotions we don't understand or can't predict. When someone opens up with vulnerability, it triggers something in us that wants to restore order. We don't like messiness, uncertainty, or emotional complexity. So instead of staying curious, we try to take over. We try to steer the conversation, redirect the feeling, or offer a quick fix. But control, no matter how well-meaning, doesn't foster closeness. It suffocates it. Curiosity, on the other hand, creates connection. When we stay open instead of trying to take charge, we create space for people to fully be themselves. Curiosity sounds like, tell me more about that, or how long have you felt this way? It doesn't come with an agenda, it comes with presence. And that's what most people are really craving, not solutions, but space. They want to feel safe to express what's happening inside them without fear of being dismissed or redirected. When we ask questions instead of offering answers, we allow people to arrive at their own truths. We're not fixing their experience, we're witnessing it. And in that witnessing, healing begins. The urge to control is often a reflection of our own unresolved fears. We want others to be okay so that we can feel okay. If they're calm, then we can relax. If they stop crying, then we don't have to feel uncomfortable. But that's not empathy, it's emotional avoidance. When we rush someone out of their feelings, it's usually because we haven't made peace with our own. That's why curiosity is so powerful. It slows everything down. It removes the pressure to fix or judge. It lets emotions move through the space instead of being shut down. And in that slower, safer space, people go deeper, not further away. One of the greatest gifts you can offer in any relationship is a curious presence. Not one that analyzes or interrogates, but one that gently invites someone to share more. Most people don't want a lecture. They want a listener. They want to be asked about their experience, not corrected for having it. They want someone who's not afraid of their feelings, even if those feelings are messy or intense. Curiosity communicates, "You don't have to edit yourself with me." It says, "I care more about understanding you than controlling this moment." That kind of energy builds intimacy, trust, and safety. It turns emotional walls into open doors. When someone is upset or vulnerable, it's tempting to jump into action, to offer advice, point out flaws in their thinking, or even try to shift their mood. But those responses often come from our own need to feel in control of the situation. Curiosity, by contrast, lets the other person lead. It lets their story unfold in their own words, in their own time. And as we follow their lead, we begin to see not just the emotion, but the story behind it. We begin to understand not just what they're feeling, but why. That understanding doesn't come from control. It comes from openness. And openness requires that we put our ego aside long enough to truly listen. Relationships break down when one person feels constantly managed instead of accepted. It's hard to feel safe when every emotion is met with correction. Over time, people start to hide what they feel. They start to filter their truth. They stop sharing, not because they've run out of feelings, but because they've run out of safe places to feel them. But when we approach with curiosity instead of control, we do the opposite. We encourage openness. We tell the other person, "You don't have to have it all figured out. I'll walk through it with you." That's the kind of support that strengthens relationships and deepens emotional bonds. True connection requires the courage to stay in the unknown, to be curious instead of controlling when the conversation gets uncomfortable. It means sitting with someone's sadness without trying to cheer them up, holding space for their anger without trying to calm them down, letting them cry without rushing them to stop. These are the moments where real intimacy is built, not through perfection, but through presence, not through advice, but through acceptance. When someone knows you won't shut them down or take over their story, they begin to trust you more deeply. And with trust comes honesty, vulnerability, and the kind of love that lasts. You can't control your way into closeness. You can only love your way into it. And love doesn't demand, it invites. Love asks questions, listens fully, and stays soft even when the conversation gets hard. That's what curiosity looks like in action. It's not passive, it's powerful, because it shows someone that you value their inner world just as it is. Not when it's cleaned up, not when it makes sense, but right now in its raw, unfiltered form. And that kind of love is rare. It's what makes people feel seen instead of judged, heard instead of fixed, loved instead of managed. Many conflicts in relationships could be resolved or even avoided if we simply replaced control with curiosity. Instead of saying, "You're being ridiculous," try, "Help me understand what's upsetting you." Instead of, "You always do this," try, "What do you think is behind that reaction?" These shifts don't weaken your voice, they strengthen the relationship, because curiosity. It doesn't mean you're letting someone walk all over you. It means you care enough to seek clarity before reacting. It means you're willing to understand before you assume. That is emotional maturity. And emotional maturity is what turns ordinary conversations into moments of transformation. At the end of the day, people don't remember how well you solved their problems. They remember how safe they felt with you. They remember whether you controlled their emotions or explored them with care. They remember the tone in your voice, the warmth in your questions, and the silence that gave them space to speak. Curiosity builds that safety. Control breaks it. And every interaction you have is a chance to choose one over the other. So when emotions rise and the moment feels uncertain, pause, take a breath. And instead of trying to fix what you don't yet understand, lean in with curiosity and just listen. That is where real love begins.